You're watching WSTV Digital Media.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 11th Community Development Housing General Government Committee meeting. We have presently 8 consent items, and we have 2 general agenda items. And if there are, right now, I'll ask, are there any that council member would like to be pulled or committee for information only?
2 and 3.
C2, C3. Any others?
I move balance. Move approval of the balance.
It's been moved and properly seconded. And we may vote. And it's been approved. First item, C2.
Information regarding status of demolition documents.
As Ms. Newman comes forward, I asked Ms. Newman when we meet every month going forward, we need to see these 2 next reports. Whether they are given as information to the general public and the TV audience, but the council will have them so you will see where we are. Ms. Newman, you're on.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Adams.
Good afternoon.
Council members, I'm Marla Newman, Community Development Director, and I'm bringing before you today an update on the demolitions as was stated. So back in 2016, staff was asked to do a compilation of the data regarding the backlog of demolition cases that had accumulated. And this initial backlog covered the period 2011 through 2015. At that time, there were 629 cases that made up what became what we call the backlog. And so the next graph is going to show you the status of those cases. So of those 629 cases, the good news is that 401 of them were actually
running conversation for years. Is there any change on the horizon at the state that would allow us any other methodology of getting these versus what we have to do now?
Not really, but
I know
think
we got good results.
All are
Oh, Councilmember
As a question,
Larson.
maybe it resides with council, but in the very last category of 66 on your first chart, where it says council consideration, are we a roadblock or something? What
no.
is council?
No, they're actually being prepared to come to you for
Oh,
consideration.
okay, so they're coming. We have not seen them yet.
Correct.
We haven't heard them or done anything.
No. Development Director. I reported to you earlier this year on the TURN program in general. And one of the things we discussed in that report was that that program also had a backlog of applications that needed to go through the process. I thought it'd be important to mention the reason for the backlog, which at that point was some persistent staff turnover in the early days of the program creation, having received incomplete applications for citizens that required some back and forth engagement to get the rest of the information so that they could actually be processed and go through the system. And then also the fact that we were taking applications year round, although we were having challenges with staying staffed and being able to move things through as we came up short on staff. So of course, the downside of that was that it created longer wait times for citizens and diminished our productivity. We, again, have been working diligently to get rid of the various backlogs. As of today, we have a total of 51 cases that we can speak of that have taken place since the TURN report, which was effective the end of December of 2018. So this is from the end of December up through now. And you'll see that of those 51 cases, 17 have been completed. Again, applications that are part of that Reduction, certainly cancellations played a part in the reduction of the backlog, just again because of the long wait times. In some instances, we reached back out to the homeowners and had learned that they had passed away. But I think the biggest factor in our ability to reduce that backlog is our current lending staff being a strong team and working together. So where the program is set up where we have one turn loan officer and one turn construction advisor, because turn had such a backlog, the other loan officers got together with the turn officer and have taken on some of those cases to move them through the system. So I'd like to just really congratulate the staff for banding together and trying to come up with a solution to move this through so that everyone can be served.
Any comments or questions, Councilmember Clark?
Given that you finished
What point do you think we're going to be ready to take applications?
In the fall.
We're
This
still
is just
looking
a
to
term,
the...
right,
to
this
the-
is just a term program, so it doesn't address some of the other loans and backlog that we have. But our goal is to open back up for applications for all programs in the fall.
In the fall.
So we wanted to just clear the slate, get our house in order, get staffed up again. We have had some recent loss of staff. We've lost 2 construction advisors in the last 6 weeks. So we're advertising for those positions. We need a new loan officer as well. So we had one person promoted to the supervisor position. So that took us down a regular staff person for loan processing. So part of the goal this summer in working through the cases that we have and trying to get back up to full staff capacity, then we're hoping to open the doors again in the fall.
Councilmember McIntosh.
What do we pay a construction advisor?
I'm sorry?
What do we pay? How much? What's the salary?
Mid to upper 40s.
In this market, that seems like it'd be tough.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if they have their building level certifications, then that could go up.
Okay.
But the entry position is mid to upper 40s.
Chairman Adams, and also in response to Councilmember Scipio's question, while we've been working through the backlog, we still have been able to process our emergency repair applications. So we have been able to provide some level of assistance to citizens while we're trying to work through the backlog.
Okay. Councilmember Larson.
For those out in TV land, let me understand the parameters of the program a little bit. There are boundaries to the districts that are authorized to apply for this loan still?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and those are available online or someplace some people can see whether their house falls as an eligible district.
They should be on the website, but if they're not, just ask them. People can call them.
Contact you personally, and they'll fill it.
Well,
The total amount available for a loan is 40?
No, sir, 65.
65 now, we bumped it up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the number of loans that do you have a cap on the number of loans that you are willing to give out any given year? Are you going to open up applications again in the fall? Is there a limit to the number of applications you will receive?
No, just until the money's gone.
There will be until the money's gone. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? This item also is for information, and you'll be seeing this on a monthly basis in our meeting. Thank you, Ms. Newman and Ms. Logan Ford and the Community Development and Housing General Government staff for getting us to this point and understanding the push that we were under a couple of years ago once we realized how much our backlog was in these 2 areas. But as we continue to work through to get to our housing strategy, that you'll be seeing more of these types of reports so the council and the community will understand that we are working and that it's just going to take us, a little time if we're going to do this right. We've got to take care of the things that maybe we weren't so good at for the past 2 or 3 years and get that right, and then we move on to the best that we can be. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We now will go to the general agenda, which has 2 items. First item, please.
G1, presentation on Opportunity Zone Program.
We have, go ahead,
I was gonna
Mr. Raleigh.
kick things out.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Adams, Chairman Adams, members of the committee and council. So we do have with us Jeannie Milliken-Bonds, who is the Community Development Manager with the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, who is here today to provide you all with some information on the Opportunity Zone program. I know it's a program that has received much publicity and lots of discussion, and we thought it would be fitting to bring that conversation and an overview formally of the program before you today. Just for those who aren't familiar, again, Opportunity Zones, it was a program that was passed with, or created with the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2017, and the whole premise of the program is to leverage the power of private capital for the betterment of low-income, rural, and urban communities. So Ms. Milliken-Bonds has quite a bit of experience in many different communities. She's worked, I know, with Charlotte, with Wilmington. She's working with us potentially, hopefully, here in Winston-Salem, also with many other partners in our region. So it's a great pleasure to have her with us today. So without further ado, I will turn things over to her.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you to the members of the council. I do represent the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. I'm based in North Carolina. I'm a North Carolinian. I'm a former mayor of a town in North Carolina. And these views are mine and not those of the Federal Reserve System, but I'm not talking about interest rates, so I think we're probably safe here today.
You can if you want to.
We have a Q&A.
I don't know if you want to hear what I have to say.
Well, you might have some inside information.
Right. How's the market?
Okay, so Evan, I may need a little technical help here. The community development function in the Federal Reserve is probably the lesser known function. You probably know us for monetary policy, for the payment system, but we have this function that exists in all the Federal Reserve banks and the Board of Governors, and our role is really to facilitate economic growth, solutions in low and moderate income communities. It came about because of the Community Reinvestment Act that was passed in the late 70s, and the Reserve banks, we're a regulator of that for banks, and the Reserve banks realized that it would be beneficial to have people that could interface with the community as well as the banks. So for this particular program, as Evan said, we do not have a regulatory role in this program, only the U.S. Treasury does. But what we are here to offer is some information, some practices that we're seeing, and some insights, as well as whatever support we can provide for your community. This started off as a standalone piece of legislation in Congress that was passed, that was presented in 2016. It did not pass. When it passed as a provision of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, what was stripped from it were what I would call guardrails. Things like collecting the metrics to know what was going on, a transparency component. Some of those things were stripped out of it when it was put in this provision. So there's some things taking place in Congress where there's other bills being introduced that could conceivably adjust that, but for right now, we're dealing just with that provision that was introduced. Two parts to the provision. The first part said the governor was to designate zones. He did that in March of last year. The second part starts to talk about how individual investors can invest their capital gains in these communities. We do have regulations that have been put out by Treasury, and still some ways to go on some of those things. But generally, these low-income census tracts, we have some in each county of the state. We have 2 counties that have kind of an exception because they didn't have a low-income tract that really was generating any activity. So in Polk County and Camden County, we have one of the exceptions to the rule. These are the same low-income census tracts we would use in New Markets Tax Credit. It's the same ones that have eligibility for investment and lending and services under the Community Reinvestment Act. And the goal is really pretty simple. Drive local, national, private sector investments into these underserved communities It's the largest program we've had come out of the federal government since New Markets Tax Credit. People are genuinely hopeful about it, but we do have to kind of overcome some of these issues with how we collect data to be able to show it's successful, and then certainly transparency is a huge issue with it. Who can benefit? Literally any U.S. taxpayer that has capital gains defined in the Internal Revenue Service Code as net 1231 capital gains can potentially benefit. So it could be individuals, it could be corporations, it could be real estate developers, syndicators, private equity funds. For those investors, there's basically three things they can do. They can get a temporary deferral, they can get a reduction, or they can get an exemption. And there's a couple of ways they can do that, and then depending on how long they hold their money, that really determines how great that benefit could be for them. And what they have to do as an investor is they have to invest in a qualified opportunity fund. And a fund is either a corporation or a partnership that's set up to invest in these communities. All you have to do to create a fund is file Form 8996 with the IRS, and you're basically self-certifying to the IRS that you are a qualified opportunity fund. It's going to be audited twice a year, and that's really it. Again, unfortunately, we have no way to see that, no way to vet it. If I talk about Community Reinvestment Act, I know about the banks because we regulate them. This is a bit of a good faith effort, so people really have to ask questions in order to be able to vet those funds. These qualified opportunity funds, really this model was designed so that you would have a fund and then funds could go out and invest in any number of zones. So you could have a fund that was set up of investors in Winston-Salem that only wants to focus on Winston-Salem. You could have a fund in North Carolina that says we want to invest in zones in Charlotte, Winston-Salem, Wilmington, Greensboro. So there are a couple of listings where you can look. Some are national, some are regional, some are local. Right now, a lot. I know you know me. We feel good about putting our money together in the community, so we are seeing quite a bit of the local fund development. They can be regulatory guidance. We had the first tranche of guidance in October 2018, really focused on real estate. So a lot of what we see right now is real estate. People feel pretty comfortable. Then we had this tranche of regs in April that focused on business, leasing, types of businesses, expansion of businesses. None of these are final. So we're still operating in a world where they're not final regs. Lots of questions still out there. If you wanted to take a look at what some of the funds look like, there's two places you can go. Novogradac has a voluntary listing of all the funds, and the National Council of State Housing Agencies. If you look at that, I added it up this morning. There were about 120 funds totaling about 120 billion is what they were reporting. And the scope of this, potentially, the estimates are 6 trillion. So right now there's funds reporting about 120 billion as that they're hoping to capitalize. This chart just shows you some of the key dates, really for the investors and the funds, but it does sort of drive what a community or a local government's doing in terms of their projects. So if you look at the second box, that's kind of that maximum benefit an investor can get, that 15% reduction, and they need to have made that investment by the end of this year. So regulations aren't final, end of the year. We're really hoping that Treasury is strongly considering pushing that date out a year so that we won't all feel so panicked about it. The other dates probably I think communities can benefit from this as well as the investors by thinking about all of the a good time to think about the priorities, think about what you have, think about your local investors, and take advantage of it by being very creative. So I think a community can do that. I've been to a number of communities across the state. The west end of Charlotte, we had a 2-day program where we really honed in on what do they want to see in their community and how can they finance it. So as you well know, lots of other opportunities here. In the state, we have strong CDCs. You have strong CDCs in Winston-Salem that can do real estate development. We have CDFIs in the state. Collaborators, the bank, the public CDFIs. This is about a $1 billion project. About half was public money. The other half is philanthropic and private investment. And this is before opportunity zones. Occurred over a 10-year period, including the Great Recession, and the partners in this effort were very creative. capital requirements. There's a lot of innovations taking place. There are communities that are setting out guidelines to mitigate community harm. There are communities that are negotiating opportunity funds for community benefits agreements, like you would see in a bank merger. And a good example of this is Los Angeles. There's about 20 funds that are actually doing what I call street corner investments. Take down one house, put 24 units of affordable housing, and then do a negotiation with the city to make sure that residents within that zone can acquire that housing. We're doing the same thing on businesses around wages. So there's some effort to create, again, these are kind of voluntary contractual agreements. There's a number of mission-oriented institutions that are sponsoring funds, like Enterprise Community Partners that builds affordable housing. I mentioned the foundation incentives, where foundations are stepping in to negotiate some of these benefits and guarantee some returns. Purpose-built communities, I think they've been here to Winston-Salem. That is something that's starting to occur in some of the zones. Southeast Raleigh, as well as Norfolk, are having conversations with purpose-built communities. And then there's some examples, including Southeast Raleigh, where you have a new market tax credit deal for a Y and some other facilities, and that is going to be paired up with some opportunity funds. So just in our district, I've been documenting some of these. Baltimore, Maryland has a fund in place. It's Prudential Social Impact Fund. The third phase of that project I showed you is a brownfield to mixed use, and they have a fund that's redeveloping that brownfield. Charlottesville, Virginia has some affordable housing, mixed use, that's being led by a fund managed by Habitat for Humanity. Asheville, North Carolina has a workforce housing project that's being led by a local fund created in that community. I mentioned Rock Hill and Raleigh and Norfolk, and that's just a few. It's starting to pick up, but again, the only way I can track them is kind of call them and ask them questions. There's no place to go find all the details. I think other possibilities that I tell communities to think about are industrial and manufacturing facilities. There's a lot about business expansion, certainly housing, renewable energy, food processing and production. We have lots of real estate developments because people feel pretty good about that with the current regs. And then broadband is one where there's some projects where banks are actually getting involved because they can receive CRA credit for broadband investments. So we're starting to see that occur in some rural areas. I mentioned up front, I certainly have concerns. I think people working in the community development field have these. Could be a lot of capital that's deployed to a community where the community really doesn't have the projects to be able to absorb it. There's no one really to manage that market. Not any of these guardrails. So, we know storage facilities are businesses that we need. Do we need them in opportunity zones? They don't really employ people. They're passive uses. There's no guardrails on that. The only guardrail are against sin businesses as defined in the IRS code. Gentrification and displacement, unless a community gets creative about how to negotiate with a fund and gets a broker to help them with that in some way, there's really no way to guard against gentrification. So I feel like the best thing is to make sure people are well informed so it doesn't happen to you, but happens with you. Hotspots and deserts. This was intended to help the deserts that didn't have the investment, but a lot of the movement is more on the hotspots right now. So I think we just have to work harder in some of the communities, especially rural areas. And then, guard against investments the community may not want to see happen, any type of investment that drives up the cost of living in low-income zones. And then certainly this lack of reporting and metrics and really no requirements to have stakeholder engagement except what we create on our own accord. And I will stop there and be happy to take any questions. And again, just, offer my assistance to the city as you think through this.
Thank you very much. I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Milliken. Milliken, is that it?
Yeah, that's my maiden name.
Milliken, well,
She's a Milliken.
I know, Milliken Bonds, at the program you had at the Central Y here in Winston a month or two ago. Very well attended. There were others there from all over the region that were presenting banks and other investment groups. It was very good. I am sure the council, our committee, I'll entertain questions and concerns. But the one thing I always say about this, it's a good idea. For the most part, when it hit that this was going to happen, a lot of people became very excited and hopeful. And I'm not saying that they aren't now. It's just that nothing is coming to fruition yet because the regulation and the rules haven't been created. And that's in the hands of the federal government. And then it goes to the state government, and then it comes to us. So it's been a while, and again, I just hope that we are able to see this come to fruition. Any comments, questions from the committee? Councilmember Clark.
You do not work for the Federal Reserve.
I work for the Federal Reserve.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
But we are not the federal government.
Right.
Oh, I know that. I'm an economist by training. I don't think they could have created something more complicated if they tried. I'm a fairly sophisticated investor. To take capital gains, which are taxed at max of 20%, to invest and save 15% at the whole to 2026,
Yeah.
that's less than 2% a year return on my money. I could pay the 20%, go buy tax freeze at 4%. And but anyway, you didn't do that. Congress did. We'll blame them.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's good intentions, but somebody, and I'm not sure in looking through this who's going to do it, but somebody's got to go out and find people with capital gains that want to invest in this. And those are not foundations and things of that sort because they don't pay taxes. It's got to be high-income individuals for the most part. And I'd just be curious if you could keep us posted over time how many of these are able to pull it off. I certainly like your concept. To do some of these projects, these big projects, you do need a lot of layers or whatever you call it, stacks. And we do that all the time. Usually it's our money, maybe a little county money, a little federal, state, whatever we can come up with. But if you want to take this back to Washington, I think it could not be more complicated. And I think to find individuals to take capital gains and defer tax for an 8-year investment and say 15%, it's not going to entice them. And there's administrative costs. Somebody's got to go find all that money, and they're going to get a commission on it. So anyway, I'm going to be curious. You're not the first time I've heard this presented. I just think it's complicated. I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I've been to several seminars on this, and a couple that I've attended with fellow council people, and one speaker defined it as a baklava, and you've got all these layers in it, and in order for it to be successful, you've got to have, first of all, the community support, because ideally this community support. You don't want the capital coming in and saying what they want to do without input, and we've had firsthand experience with what happens when you don't do that, so we're, I think, very careful about that. One of my concerns is that we're seeing this, we're kind of, because we're a tertiary market, we're seeing money come in, for instance, in the apartment, multifamily sector right now, long after all of the big cities have been sort of picked over. So we're a couple of years behind the trend there. I worry with the timetable that's here that, again, we're not gonna have people come looking at Winston-Salem to park their money or utilize their money until the effective sweet spot of these is gone. So I'm hoping that can push back. And I think a 10-year hold is probably the sweet spot on it, right? I mean, you really get the maximum benefit at 10 years. 10 years is a long time out on any real estate deal. So I think there will be some hesitancy on that. Is a good real estate deal today still going to be a good real estate deal 10 years from now? But, I hope we get something out of it. I mean, there's a lot of effort locally around trying to be a partner and pulling things together, but it's complicated. But thank you.
Yeah, it is. I would say there's one bank that has a fund, and
Who's
they are PNC. I don't think they'll mind me saying that.
That's
And
fine.
they are matching it with, they're matching it with the Community Reinvestment Act. So they're looking for projects and they're doing that matchmaking. But you're right, the finding investors and helping them find a fund and the fund find the projects, you really needed probably a 4-year timeline to build up to that. But there are some small deals happening, and there are quite a few funds in North Carolina. There's about 7 at this point. And so I think you will have some funds that'll probably be looking at Winston-Salem.
Councilmember Best.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. So there's no publicly available list of QAOFs at this point?
Only that if they self-report on those 2 sites. If a fund decides they want to put something out there, they put it out there, but otherwise no list that goes to their filing of that form.
And there's no requirement for multiple investors in a QOF? It can be a single entity?
It has to be a partnership or a corporation, so it can't be one individual.
All right, but it can be a single corporation.
Correct.
And there's no restriction except for barring the so-called sin businesses. There's no restriction on the kind of investment. So someone simply looking to park some capital gains for a few years could, as you say, build a storage facility
Right.
anywhere.
Right. They have guidance on substantially improving property or buildings and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Any more comments? Councilmember Law.
Just 2 things strike me. One is the window of investment seems fairly small here, a couple years. And as complicated as this is to put it together, I'm going to be interested to see, how active it can be within the couple years that you're allowing. The second thing that I observed is that we're getting ready to do a census in 2020, and is that going to redefine the zones?
These zones go out to 2026, and then if this
Okay.
program, if there's enough metrics to decide when those census tracts are redrawn, if the program continues.
So the zones that have been established now will not be changed by the census
Correct.
within the period of this funding program. Thank you.
Councilmember Mack.
Just a quick note, I asked our tax mapping people at the county if they could provide the Opportunity Zone map as an overlay on our GIS system, so it's available now, just as a checkbox, so you can kind of see where
Oh, great.
exactly where it lays
Yeah.
out.
Good. Helpful.
Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming, and maybe as we move forward in this and we get more direction, we'll be working more with you and the folks up in Richmond.
Right. Don't hesitate to call me if I can be of assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, please.
G2, Building Integrated Communities Annual Report.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We are here to give you an update, to provide an update on the Winston-Salem Building Integrated Communities Program. And, I'm sorry, Wanda Allen Aberha, Human Relations Department. And so I have with me 3 of the Building Integrated Communities community stakeholders. They represent 3 of the organizations who've been with us from the very start of the program. And so the organizations represented are Wake Forest Baptist Health, and we have Dr. Kimberly Montez. We have Novant Health represented with Lita Patricia Spainhour, and we have the Hispanic League represented with their executive director, Mary Jo Turner. And so I am not going to delay their presentation any further, and I know I am supposed to be bringing this up on this laptop, and I have to figure out what I'm doing here. Give me just a second.
I accepted the award that Dee Dee worked.
That is very true.
He's honest. He's honest.
I don't know where it was. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was really early. I want some credit.
And yes, thank you to Chairwoman Dee Dee Adams for identifying this program for us and the grant funding and all of the things that came along with it, because we were happy to receive the National Award for Cultural Diversity from the NLC a couple of years ago. And thanks to Council members Larson and McIntosh for being there to accept that award. Thank you. Oh, good. Perfect. Perfect stalling time.
Hi, good evening. Thank
Good evening.
you so much for having me, all of the members of the City Council. Again, my name is Kimberly Montez. I'm a pediatrician. I practice with Wake Forest Health, and I'm here representing the Health Subcommittee for the Building Integrated Communities. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update of what we've been up to this past year.
If I can interrupt, if you move more to the microphone.
Yeah.
so that
Okay,
people at
sure,
home
no
can
problem.
hear you. We can hear you, but
Thank you. So here in Winston-Salem, we have the fortune of having so many wonderful community organizations and agencies who are dedicated to the well-being of our community. Our goal in the Building Integrated Communities, I'm going to call it BIC for short, because it's a tongue twister, is to unite all of these organizations, and we do that through 3 different ways. First of which is we've developed an online cultural community resource guide hosted at the Human Relations website, which you can go and visit yourselves, which we are constantly updating. The other venue by which we do that is we host pipeline educational sessions, and we instituted an inaugural newcomer symposium, which we'll talk about each of these in detail. So first, I want to tell you a little bit of a little bit about the pipeline program that we have, the educational sessions that we host. These are quarterly educational sessions that we provide to immigrants, refugees, and asylees who attend these sessions, and they receive lots of information on the community organizations and resources in Winston-Salem. We take into account these residents, the cultural background of these residents, and we also take into account the languages that are represented. The attendees of these educational sessions are given the presentations from each of these organizations, which I'll go into detail in the next slide, and they are also provided follow-up for each of these organizations and contacts for these programs. So this slide, it gives you a little bit of an idea of each of the programs that we talk about at these pipeline sessions. So the first is fair housing, which the Human Relations Department represents, as well as the Community Development Department. We have public safety. The police department attends and provides a presentation, as well as the city and county services. The transportation is represented by the Winston-Salem Transit Authority. The educational system is represented by a number of these organizations, the school system, Forsyth Tech, where we host these pipeline sessions at, as well as the Hispanic League. And the health system, represented by the organizations such as Novant and Wake Health, as well as United Health Centers and the Community Care Center. Legal services are represented by Legal Aid. We also have Faith by the Faith Health, and we also have World Relief, which is our local refugee organization. So for the 2018-2019 year, we have had quarterly sessions, and we've had good attendance at each of these sessions. And for the past year, we've had about 138 residents whom we've served. And as you can see, they're sitting here. Many of them have headphones on because we provide on-site interpretation for each of the languages represented. And in fact, we have one of our interpreters here, Adolfo Briceño. 14 languages have been represented thus far. So as you can see up here, we have a good representation from all over the globe: Spanish, Russian, German, French, Romanian, among many others. Last year, we instituted the inaugural statewide newcomer symposium. It was very well attended. It was hosted at the Benton Convention Center, and we had over 125 participants from all over the state, representing a number of different organizations. There were 12 breakout sessions with various topics, including one that I gave on the health. We talked about the public charge, along with a lot of the health challenges for immigrant refugee patients. And this year, we're going to have a second event so save the date. Hopefully you will all be able to attend. It's October 17th, 2019, and it will be at the Forsyth Tech Community College. These are some pictures from the last event. As you can see, we have a panel of various providers. We had a keynote speaker, and we had a lot of attendees as well. And even our own Ms. Alan Abraha gave a welcome introduction as well. You can see her down there on the bottom picture. This is a list of all of the organizations who are represented on the stakeholder committee. And we meet right here in your seats, so thank you for letting us sit around the table. And these are the upcoming 2019-2020 pipeline welcome sessions again, held at Forsyth Tech from 9 to 12:30, July, October, January, and April. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Can we answer any questions?
I think you guys do a great job.
Thank you so much.
Again, cities only thrive when the people that live here get engaged and volunteer to become a part of it, to help welcome other people to the community. You know, ours is kind of biased. We're looking for more tax base. But we're also very, very glad to have the diversity and inclusion of others into our city here in Winston-Salem. And thank you all. Any of you would like to make a comment about what you've been doing? I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yes, I actually, and I was ready to couple them for her if she couldn't make it to the meeting, but yeah, I'm so glad she did it because she did a very good job. So I actually I feel like I represent the immigrants sector as well because I'm originally from Costa Rica. So I came to Winston-Salem and I have learned so much during the last 2 years. So yeah, participating in this committee has been amazing, a very good experience. I joined Novant back in 2016 at the same time when I joined this committee. And we have been able to bring a lot also, not only for integrating healthcare to the needs of the community, but also other sectors that are represented in our committee. So we thank you for listening, and if you guys have any questions, we will be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just share that having been one of the not one of the newer people, but one of the people who were here in the founding of this, it's been a real positive experience to see this program grow. As many of you already know, we have 92 languages now spoken in Forsyth County schools, and I think this is just one more way we can help support those many people that are moving to our community. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments or business?
Councilmember
Bessie.
Thank you. I'd just say thank you all for your work. This is a particularly valuable program, and I always enjoy going when possible to the pipeline sessions and helping welcome participants. And if you haven't done that yet, I recommend it.
They're fun. Yeah.
Councilmember Larson.
We are an international city, is what this is showing us, and diverse. You say 14 languages, but I just hear 92. Did somebody, what was the number?
In the county.
In the county. So it gives you some idea that we are not isolated here in the Piedmont, that we are right. We are an international city, and very proud of that as well.
Councilmember Bessie.
Did have one detailed question. The symposium on October 17th, do you know what time of day it'll be held?
We are looking at having it from 9:30 until 3:30.
Okay, and you said Forsyth Tech West again?
Yes, it's going to be at the Forsyth Tech main campus. In the No, it's the main campus where the Board of Education, where the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools used to be. I forgot the name of that building. Yes.
In the back.
Send us a map.
Send us a map and a reminder.
Oak Grove Center.
Yes, thank you.
Oak
That's
Grove
correct.
Center.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or business for the committee?
Do it.
This meeting is adjourned.
Good meeting.
Thank you.